Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 2026 Mood of the Nation webinar. It's great to have you with us today as we take a mid-year look at the construction sector and the forces shaping it right now. Today's session is about pausing to take stock. Over the past 12 months, we've seen a changing market, shifting demand, and early signs of recovery in some areas, while uncertainty still remains across the wider economic and political environment. So today is an opportunity to hear from a cross-section of industry leaders about what they are seeing on the ground, what has changed, and what businesses should be preparing for next. We're fortunate to have a panel that brings together both North and South Island perspectives, as well as commercial and residential experience. So the panelists for today are Terry Buchan, who's General Manager at Hawkins, Craig Hopkins, Chief Executive of Generation Homes, Josh Gibbons, Regional Manager Southern Lakes at Cook Brothers Construction, and Kirsten Magnusson, who's the Chief Executive here at the Building Institute. My name is Hayden Blucher, and I am the Head of Engagement and Events at the Building Institute, and I will moderate today's session. Just before we get started, I would just like to take the opportunity to thank Procore Technologies for their ongoing support of the Industry Insights series for 2026. Procore are big supporters of us at the Institute, and we really appreciate their working relationship we have with the team there. So thank you for your support in making this happen. And finally, before I hand over to the experts for today, our agenda just very quickly. After this, there'll be a quick little introduction from each speaker, and they will provide an opening perspective on the current mood from their perspective. We will then have a bit of a guided panel discussion across 5 kind of key themes we've identified, and then there'll be the opportunity at the end for an audience Q&A. So please do use that Q&A function that you'll see, and we will monitor that and ask questions as we go. Well, specifically more at the end, but if anything pops up relevant at the time, we can keep track of that as well. If you don't know how to use the Q&A function, there is also the chat there as well, so we'll monitor them both. On that note, I would first like to hand over to Kirsten Magnusson, just to introduce yourself and a few words about what you're seeing at the moment.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten Magnusson, Chief Executive, as Hayden mentioned. So, I think what we're seeing at the moment is a really lumpy market in some places and a not so bad market in other places. So, really good news if you're in Queenstown or Christchurch right now. Maybe not so good news if you're in Auckland. But we're probably all getting as excited as each other about the big projects that are about to kick off. All going well with the election, that the projects do carry over, and I think the likelihood is that they will, and when that happens, there'll be some interesting times ahead. 12 months time, we should all be feeling a little bit more confident.
Awesome. Thanks, Kirsten. And then we have Terry.
Afternoon, everybody. Won't repeat those sound words from Kirsten, but pretty much along those lines. She's been pretty tough and probably hasn't been this tough since the 90s. I think, and those that are old enough will probably remember that as well, just with the amount of work that's coming to market. Is fairly skinny, but in turn some sectors are busy and some sectors are a little bit quiet. There's great prospects on the horizon, and we can't wait to see those. Definitely with Health New Zealand work and a whole lot of work for corrections. So there is a bright side to it. We know opportunities like Whangarei Hospital, for instance, have government funding in place. They're ready to go, but it just hasn't really hit the road yet. I think also during these times it's a bit of a chance to tighten up on things and get a little bit sharper, and we have an opportunity to do that. And there is opportunities there, and we look forward to a brighter horizon shortly. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Terry. And then Craig.
Afternoon, everyone. As Hayden said, Craig Hopkins from Generation Homes. I look at things probably a little bit different than some of the others. If you look at from a national perspective, 7.8% increase in houses sales over the last 12 months, which is quite a bit. And most of that's been driven off lower mortgage rates, improved access to borrowings. A lot of the banks have been a little bit more accessible to people, and a strong supply in the market. There's a lot of homes up for sale. And on the sort of the positive side of that, I suppose, if you look at interest rates, for 24-25, your average interest rate was around 6.8 to 7.2, and the sort of forecasting for the upcoming year of 5 to 5.5. So if you look at that contextually, it means that the market should be rebounding rather well coming forward
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Craig. And Josh.
Yeah, kia ora, everyone. Josh Gibbons, Regional Manager in Queenstown here. So very fortunate to be sitting on the panel from a different perspective than some who will be listening to this call. So I've got obviously a slightly tainted view on where the construction sector is, and I definitely see it as not a challenge long term for us in the sector, but I do believe the short term confidence is down. Our coordination of projects is down as well, and I believe that we're going to have a challenge around capability moving forward. And so, similar to Terry's thoughts about tightening up and looking at how we improve, I believe that the sector needs to be looking at how we're going to be attracting talent, keeping it here, and making sure that when things do return to that happy medium that we like to see, we've got the skill set here in New Zealand to deliver that work frame, and we don't have a challenge like Australia is currently seeing with the Brisbane work, as an example, and a lack of people to actually deliver the work to a standard that we believe would be better for the generations to come. So yeah, I'm truly overly confident in the construction sector. I love it. I'm a builder by trade. Luckily now I'm moved into a space, instead of building projects, I build teams. And I think the fundamental challenge we need to look at is how do we ensure our teams have the skill sets to deliver what's coming.
Awesome. Yeah, some great points there. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for being a part of the webinar. Just for anyone that doesn't know on the call, both Terry and Craig are board members of the Building Institute, and Josh sits on the Southern Regional Committee and kind of heads up the work we do down in Queenstown alongside a few others. So thank you for all of your involvement and your support of the Institute. Looking at the first theme that we're going to cover today, it's really looking back, over the past 12 months. So, Craig, I think it was literally probably about 12 months ago, you sat on this webinar that we do every year and you talked about the year ahead and stuff. So what is it that has changed over the past 12 months? How do you kind of reflect a little bit on what's, the 12 months that's been?
I think the biggest thing for us is within the residential space, especially. Our market is very much dictated by what's happening politically, both internal and external. And where people are heading. And I think the last 12 months was starting to look very good. Around November, probably November last year was one of our better months that we've had in many a year. And you sort of think, great, we're out of the bubble, we're all heading in the right direction, and this is going to be great. Interest rates were coming down, everyone was feeling pretty positive. And then our friend in America decided to cause a bit of a conflict, and that just sort of put everyone on hold, everyone at unease, and sort of I suppose stop people from thinking that it was all over and that they could move forward. And I suppose that's the massive difference in the last 12 months, has been that everyone was sort of heading in the right direction, and then we've had another reset or another pause. And I think you look at the oil rates at the moment, even though the conflict's still going, people haven't reacted as bad as what they did probably back at the start of all this. So you sort of, is it a question that people are just accepting that this is new reality and we all move on, or is something else going to pop up? And that confidence in people from a residential perspective, can I afford my mortgage? Will I have a job? Is it the right thing to be doing right now? And what are the risks involved? And once people get their head around that, I think we're going to head in the right way.
Yeah, definitely. I think, at the start of the year, there was, as you kind of mentioned, strong end of the year. And I think there was definitely some positive sentiment, and very hard to predict, the way it's kind of played out over the last 6 months with a lot of the political stuff happening abroad. Anything from Terry or Josh you want to kind of build on from that? Obviously, you both kind of work in the commercial sector.
I think really the challenges before, when we were sort of 2022, 2023, things are going really well. We're talking about labour shortages then, that's been flipped around, and now we're talking about opportunity shortages. So there's always going to be, there's always going to be something that comes up. But echoing Craig's comments too, in the commercial sector, we were along the same lines, where there was positivity and some great signs until there was until everything was unsettled and we're back in this hole again. But I think also we owe it to ourselves as an industry to also be positive, talk things up, and then that gains momentum. So the more people we have out there in the industry speaking positively is really important. And never stop training your people within and growing your own talent, because that's the future of the industry as well. And that's the next generation of people on the front line. So we must continue to train our talent through the hard times.
I believe I saw you on TV, was it a couple of weeks ago, talking kind of to that point on One News or 7 Sharp or something around some of the work that Hawkins is doing?
It's the same sentiment really. I think no matter what cycle you're in, you must continue to train your own staff, and everybody has their own internal programs, whether they're through apprenticeships or cadetships or whatever training program it is. You must maintain that momentum. But that's the future commercial people, the future delivery people, because we must always continue to deliver great projects. That's fundamental for our country.
Absolutely. Yeah. And over to you, Josh.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Terry on that, and what Craig said as well. I think the stats came out like that resource consents in the residential sector had gone up considering from last year, right? But that doesn't automatically relate into projects. People will still consent things, but they might not press go to that next phase. So there's some confidence being built, but what does that confidence look like when you actually go to the coalface? And I think for me, like to Terry's points here, is when you get challenges in the construction sector, construction people love solving challenges. I think that's one of the things that drags a lot of people to the sector, right? We're problem solvers. We like to think outside the box. And so what this does create is, in this time of certainty shortage, I'd say, rather than maybe longer term opportunity shortage, it creates that ability to think with our clients about, well, okay, yep, you've got a project now that plenty is consented, but the numbers don't stack. So then how do we work through making it stack? And I think for me is keep training your people to think outside the box, keep training your people to not stop at a no. Like there's an opportunity to leverage off relationships with other industry partners to find out better ways to build, more effective ways to build. Can you get more building per square meter on a footprint? And so a bit of change of design, but you shouldn't just give up because the book says say no. And I think that's the confidence that needs to be brought to the market. We've got to drive that confidence ourselves as well. Otherwise, if you follow all the sort of like the news stories, the clickbait stuff out there, it becomes quite depressing after a while, right? And I think construction has opportunity to change that narrative and be the leaders in the industry that the next generations need us to be, and there's ones that will continue to look outside of the box and fix these challenges. And I see times like this as a great time to sharpen your skills on how to build and how can we be more effective in our building, and how do we bring that talent that's coming through that's younger to help solve some of the challenges that some of us who've been in the industry a bit longer might not be aware of how to solve.
Yes, and great stuff there, and really like how you all spoke kind of around the people as well, which is obviously important to us at the Institute. Before we move on to the next one, Kirsten, obviously 12 months ago you sat in this webinar as a board member, and here we are with you as our Chief Executive. Is there anything you want to kind of touch on in here that hasn't already been discussed?
Not really, but I think, coming on as, we're coming up to 12 months as CE, and what hasn't changed over the last 12 months is our role, right, which is to keep people connected and informed and, making sure that our membership is ready to work once the flow starts again.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. All right, well, moving to point number 2, which is regional and sector differences, which we've heard a bit about. So in terms of, I guess, looking at the regional perspectives as well, north versus south, Kirsten, you've talked a little bit at Build NZ last week on the panel there about the work kind of heading to the regions and stuff. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so what we do know is that a lot of the work going forward, or the big chunky work, is going to be in the regions, the prisons, the hospitals, the big infrastructure projects. And I think my concern for our membership is how do we get the people to those regions? How do we mobilise them? And then when they get there, where do they live? Where do the kids go to school? How do we keep them connected? So that raises a lot of questions about workforce mobility and what as an industry we're going to be able to do there. So that's a big project for the Institute coming up.
And Josh, you've kind of touched on Queenstown being arguably a bit of a success story over the last few years. There seems to be plenty of work and opportunity down there. How does that kind of fit in with the rest of the South Island and what you're kind of hearing from Cook Brothers?
Yeah, I think on Kirsten's point, Queenstown's a region, right? We're not a city. And so, yes, it sounds like it's a gold rush down here. Things are booming and things going like we've got so much work going on. But the reality is that we're still a region. We're at the end of the line. There's logistical challenges here. There's housing challenges. There's a specialist skill set challenge as well in the region. And so I think while things sound like it's pumping here and things are great, you get into the region, you start figuring out where the constraints are, and they have other issues as well that starts to impact the day-to-day on site. No one wants to hear a Queenstowner whinging about traffic, but the reality is that a lot of my teams now spend an hour getting from their house only just down the road, maybe less than 10 k's to the site office or to two sites themselves, because there is an influx of transportation on the roads, and it's creating challenges, especially around ski seasons and tourism that drives this sector. So for us, I think it's a great opportunity to look at how do you build differently. How do you involve more centralised places that have a larger workforce to potentially move away from our traditional way of thinking in construction and start adopting off-site manufacture, modular if the opportunities are there, of course. And so I think there's ability to have a flow off for other regions if a certain sector or a certain part of the industry is really pumping. Our biggest concern always is that when everything picks up again, what happens to the Queenstown market, particularly Queenstown, Wanaka, Cromwell, what will be impacted by that, and we'll be back where we were a few years ago, where there just wasn't enough tradespeople on the ground to deliver the work we had in front of us to a standard that we would expect. And so I think right now we're seeing, obviously, Christchurch definitely moving in terms of where it has been. And I suppose for us, we're definitely nervous about what that would mean if those that have come down here to get some work while they're quiet elsewhere, when things pick up back home where their families are, where their communities are, they pick up stumps and go home again, and that leaves potentially a vacuum in Queenstown itself. So I think that's why for us there's a sentiment definitely of positivity, but then there's this reservations about what does the future look like past this, and that's probably where I come to my point about that long-term strategy rather than just right today, tomorrow, and next week.
Yeah. And Craig, Terry, obviously a bit of a different story up in Auckland, in the top of the North Island more recently. But, how are you kind of finding things from your perspectives?
Yeah, up in, I guess, starting from Wellington, the greatest pressure, on that part of the country due to the reduced central government spending, which is causing a massive amount of uncertainty and, putting pressure on the supply chain and their families and then communities. It's quite hard hit in the Wellington region and the vertical construction sector. I think Waikato Bay of Plenty, sort of as you move up the island, there's been improved growth there and they benefit from population growth, right? So that's, destined to, I think over the next sort of 20, 30 years, get up to around 250,000 people just in the centre. So that place is going pretty well. Industrial, logistics, Ministry of Education with the population growth. They're building schools, private hospitals, that type of thing. So they're going fairly well. As we know, Auckland's struggling, and a lot of private developers are actually, really struggling with getting feasibilities off the ground, and that's slowing down too. And then a lot more people will decide to, do up their own buildings rather than go and build another building and take on another tenancy risk. So, while there's signs of improve, it still hasn't happened yet. And, the couple of emerging markets we touched on before, aside from the hospitals and the education, is really around data centres. So you would have heard in the news recently the increase in data centres, particularly in the South Island, where arguably they might get 1 or 2 days of summer a year. It's quite a good place for a data centre. Like in the North Island as well. So that's also heading up in that space and the AI space and technology. So I think that's going to be a big go-to for people over the next few years. Will be in the technology building and data centres, definitely.
How quickly do you think those data centres are going to kind of we're going to see those data centers be built and stuff? Is that kind of a one-year thing, or a bit?
That's starting to, early stages of procurement at the moment. Obviously, the one in Buchan, site works are underway, and that's starting to gain some momentum. There's a few up in the north that are in early procurement phases as well. So that momentum starting again. A lot of that also comes from Australia, where they can't get enough people to build them in Australia. I wish we had that problem over here.
Exactly. And Craig?
Oh, look, I think it's, the guys have mentioned around definitely regional variances, and same with us. I mean, we're obviously nationwide as well. And the challenge that we have is a price differential, I suppose. If the amount of houses that are on the market, you can go and buy a new house for $800,000. You got to build a new house for $1 million. So what are you going to do? Are you going to buy that a house at 800, or you're going to try and buy a new one at $1 million? I mean, if you look at Auckland and Wellington, both of those are 25% off the peak of 2022, and Auckland's 3% down on last year. If you look at Christchurch, they only dropped 3.6 in 2022, and they're 4% up on last year. So, Canterbury for us is definitely the place where it's going. And likewise with Dunedin, Dunedin's pretty positive as well. Hamilton's pretty flat, so it hasn't suffered as much. But for us, it's all about that price differential, and we need that price differential to come back. And that's scary for a lot of people, probably in Wellington and Auckland, who maybe bought in that peak, who are potentially looking at negative equity in housing. So they're going to be stuck for a little while until that market shifts. And that's what drives people moving. People want to move to the next house, but if people can't sell, it makes it a bit difficult to move.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's what you've all said is pretty consistent. We went to an event this morning with BDO, and one of the things that came out of there was that the South Island leads the forward work outlook, with 82% of South Island businesses reporting sufficient confirmed work for at least 6 months. So definitely seems to be, in terms of regional differences, sentiment around the South Island finding a bit more positive and finding, things are a bit more certain. But yeah, as you said, with Auckland and Wellington across both residential and commercial seems to have been challenging. And, with an election coming up at the end of the year, that usually means that things quieten down, and then, depending on the outcome of that, can have all sorts of different implications. So yeah, it certainly hasn't been easy, but kind of sticking on the theme for what you've just been talking about in a way, and Craig, might kind of start with you because you were touching on it a little bit. What are some of the main pressures affecting business decisions at the moment? Yeah.
I think for us, we're always, the boys have talked about, around evolving our people and making sure our people are there. And so you've got that decision around how long can you hold that line? From a business perspective, we've done the same thing. We've invested in our people, we've trained our people, but it comes a point, if you don't start seeing a rebound, where is that line that you've got to draw a line from a business perspective? So that's something that's constantly on our mind around those costs. Cost of materials. Everyone's getting impacted by that at the moment. And if you're pricing work now, what is that material going to be worth in X period of time? And how much do you put on the materials at the moment, trying to cater for that? But then that makes it too expensive. And just sort of those sort of things. For us, there's a lot of space in the local government around the changes that they're looking at. I just wrote a few things down here. So we've got granny flats, got RMA reform, you got the private building consents, you got building consent reform, you got Building Amendment Act, you got the liability reform, and the overseas building products. So it's a fair amount of government change that you're looking at, saying how and what impact will that have on our business, and what do we need to take for, especially around the liability stuff for house builders. That's quite amazing. You're taking on those liabilities for the likes of ourselves and most of probably the group home builders. It's something we all offer anyway, pretty much offer 10-year warranties and all that sort of thing. But if you're a smaller independent builder, it's probably a tough thing that you're going to be sitting at your business trying to work out how much is this insurance going to cost me and what do I need to do. So those are the sort of things that they're probably going through from a residential perspective anyway.
Yeah. Great. Anyone want to jump in next? Josh or Terry? What are some of the main pressures affecting kind of business decisions from your end?
Yeah, I think it's probably equal around the sector, I think, through most businesses. There's pressures on margins. You've still got a return of profit. It's often a bigger concern than the workload itself that we get into. So, and people will also be more selective in what you're bidding, due to the increased pricing risk, because you can't have stuff ups, and you've got to make sure you deliver your projects well. So the pressure comes on when there's not much work there, and having to pick opportunities to still to be able to return a profit to the business. That is a big thing, and people also remaining cautious around the capital investment and recruitment. So investing in, I guess, good people that are in the market, because there is some good people in the market. There's a reluctance to take good people on because the workload is not there in front of you. We talked a little bit about before about the hospital work about to hit the market, but also with the the likes of the prisons that are there or thereabouts. There's a massive one in Christchurch, and there's also a pretty large one in the North Island. They're both about to go, so we just need that stuff to tick over, and that will definitely help the industry. And there's a lot more due diligence now on. It used to be the other way around, right? So you have a lot more due diligence on you when you're undertaking a project, but now there's also a lot more due diligence that we undertake on our clients and consultants that we work with. So it also goes the other way. Also think, with the election approaching, you talked a little bit about this in the intro, Hayden. Many clients are delaying their decisions. That's been happening for a while now, and that's now going even slower. So, let's get this thing moving, and get the election out of the way and get the country going again, and start to get some energy, and everyone has a role to play in speaking positively.
100%. There's something to say about being positive. And Josh?
Yeah, sentiment from both Craig and Terry here. Similar on my end. I think uncertainty is the killer of projects, right? It's the killer of our industry. Uncertainty is just a part that we have to face every day, unfortunately. But the adage is always, it was cheaper to build yesterday, has always been the case. Like, no matter how many times we've been through this cycle, it was always cheaper to build yesterday. And I think, for me, seeing projects getting killed before they even got to a point where they've been put in front of the building smarts of a main contractor, or that sort of element where we can look at what is actually the output we need to get here and how do we get there. Like, construction can generally respond to a known cost. We can estimate it, procure it, we can redesign it, we can allow for it. We can then also make business decisions based on risk profiling, and like sometimes that turnover is better off because we can keep our people for longer, and maybe adjust our margins accordingly for that period of time to get through what we see as a downturn without killing a project, because no revenue is not a good outcome. So, but in that saying too, if the construction sector, the developers, the government, New Zealand as a whole wants to have a sector that is strong, will be there in 10 years' time when the projects need that extra input, they want things to be built correctly, then we have to invest in the future coming through. To do that, we need to have workflow. So there's a challenge here, probably more to everyone, that's going, well, if you want the sector there for the good times, you need to support it in the bad too, when the work's not so there. So engaging with the builders or whoever earlier to make sure that this thing's stacked before you start getting to design frame, and really leaning into that skill set and knowledge that we've got, which is really strong in New Zealand. We've got some great people doing some amazing things who think outside the box. I think if we want to keep them here, we need to make sure the workload's there for them. And then as a building company, you want to be able to invest in those people, and you want to have that confidence that you can keep investing them and keep them as well, like Terry's saying, keeping those people on board, making those recruitment decisions. But I think also we've got to think about the small guys, right? The smaller sort of sole trader style builders in New Zealand, or tradespeople in New Zealand, they rely on all that work too. And when they've got all of this stuff going on around, like Craig mentioned, there's so much legislation change and information coming at them, like how are they being supported? What is in place for them to ensure that they can get through this period too, and that they understand the risk? Because risk transferred is not a risk removed. So just by transferring the risk down the line to someone else doesn't mean that we're taking that risk off the table. And I think for me, it's looking at how do you educate everyone to a level that we understand where the risk sits, so then we can either get it gone completely or have it transferred equitably across everyone. So one person's not left carrying that risk at the end of the day, because that's how you see things go backwards, right? When these people then no longer exist in the sector because one of those risks, because they've made it a business decision, has taken them out of the market. And I think that longer term is more detrimental now than having those honest conversations about what risk is actually there and how do we either design it out, manage it out, or have an equitable outcome where everyone takes a bit of that skin.
Yeah, great. And Kirsten, in terms of what we're hearing from our members, I mean, that pretty much aligns with a lot of the feedback I guess we'd be getting. Is there anything you wanted to add kind of to that?
I think the key thing that I hear all the time is that you can't just switch off an industry and expect it to scale up and down without seeing a huge amount of cost and a huge amount of losing good people to Australia. So it's really tough for the third tier contractors and the residential builders and the apartment builders. They've been hit really hard, and it's going to be a challenge for them to keep going while the market is still the way it goes, because there is pipeline, but it's not flowing like normal, right? So there's fewer constructions around at any one time. So it's becoming, it's that much more aggressive in the tendering. So it's difficult, isn't it? So we just need that pace of recovery to become a little less uncertain and start so we can just get going again, get out of this holding pattern.
Yeah, there's been a few kind of key words that have appeared probably in the first half an hour of this, which uncertainty, challenges and stuff like that. So moving to the next theme and trying to look, a little bit more positively now, where do you all see the opportunities lying, over the next 12 to 24 months? We'll start with you here, Kirsten.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, I won't go into the sector opportunities. I think that's for the other guys, but I think for the Institute or for our members, it's about building relationships, and for us, it's helping them to build those relationships and to build trust, because, as Josh was saying, or everybody has been saying, actually, if we're going through the due diligence process with so much more rigor, then trust is a really important aspect of that. So that's something that the Institute can take a really strong position on. For us, it's also around clearing pathways for training and education. So we have our Career Streams project that we've just launched. We're about a third of the way through that, but the idea is that we create this vision of a workforce in New Zealand in the construction industry that is really exciting, has got lots of capacity for learning and growing and doing amazing things. I think for us, it's just helping members navigate innovation and to understand what the industry will be like in the way ahead and helping people to get there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and good plug for the Career Streams project as well, which, as you see, got launched and is awesome. So hoping to see that get picked up by industry as well. In terms of, opportunities, Craig, what are you kind of excited about? Where do you think the opportunities lie?
I think for us Josh alluded to it right at the start. He was saying about, our industry is all about finding solutions, right? And finding ways to be different or finding ways to push forward. And I think you see that quite a bit in the residential sector at the moment. You're finding, there's a lot more houses that are getting built under turnkey conditions. There's a lot more spec building getting done so that it's ready available because that's what the market's dictating. We launched a product a few months ago called Generation Trade-In. You trade in your car, why not trade in your house? So there's lots of innovative different ideas that the residential sector are coming up with to try and mitigate people's challenges, I suppose. You sat down there when we did the Generation Trade thing. We looked at some data. We tried to understand what it was that was stopping people from coming and buying a new house. What were the what were the barriers and how could we do it? And that's where it came from. So it's sitting there looking, going, what are the barriers? How can we change it? Or what can we adapt to be better? And if we can do that, and that offers the opportunity for us to continue building, it's the right way to go. So I think that's the big thing, is just looking at how you can make changes.
Yeah, nice. Thierry?
Yeah, I think, look, there's lots of opportunities and a good thing to be positive about. I think getting productivity back to some form average will be pretty good and something to look forward to. And you'll do a lot of that through the introduction of technology. So what we've found is technology is definitely improving productivity. And once we improve productivity, it just improves you doing things faster and a lot more of it. So if you can convert that into actually delivery of projects, it's got to be a good thing. I think the being in a downturn, there's still a number of growth sectors, like we talked about before, with the likes of the data centers, the water, the health, the education programs. They continue to underpin our activity in the industry, but there's also other things emerging, like there's a big shift into design and construct delivery. To the point earlier around risk transfer, it's been seen as in the past as a big risk dump to the contractor, but choosing who's best to manage that risk is the best approach. And regardless if we like it or not, that approach is coming. We've got Australian builders, moved over to New Zealand now that we're competing with. Their focus is design and build. They've come from a very successful passage or era of design and build construction projects in Australia. And that skill set's coming over to New Zealand. So I think everyone's got an opportunity to get on board with that pretty quickly, because if you snooze, you're going to lose. That's going to be a big growth market. So fronting that early and making sure your teams are equipped with some form of design and build capability is going to be really important. Also, clients are increasingly seeking cost and time certainty, so that's been driven into the D&B world. So that's another reason why that's going to be there. Also, we talked a little bit about productivity and technology. Using the tools like AI and BIM, offsite manufacturing, to a certain extent, although it hasn't been that successful across the board, there's still something to be looked at, and improves project controls. As an example of that, just with the use of AI, one of our team got together over a couple of days and developed like a really, really awesome QA plan and deliverable schedule that would normally take someone probably months and months to do on a project basis. So utilising the tools well is a real benefit. You just got to know a little bit what the input is, what it is, crap in, crap out. So being smart about that. I think in the next cycle, it was touched on before, about cost certainty and costs going up and escalation. We're definitely going to be in that again, right? We're going to have a shortage of labour, shortage of skill set, and we're going to have cost escalation. So if we know that up front, we can deal with it a lot better. I think procurement of projects, getting those smarter. It's all about the people delivering the jobs and the businesses, right? Because our industry is all about people. If we don't procure the next wave of projects properly, we're going to end up with another seascape sitting down the bottom of town for another 10 years, and that's a bloody eyesore. So focusing on procurement and getting that done well is going to be really important. Investing in your people, continue to train, and looking for other opportunities. Talked a little bit before, Hayden, about 7 Sharp, and hopefully people put 7 Sharp a couple of weeks ago. You would have seen one of our cadets on there, George. George has come from the pathway of the cadetships that we talked a little bit about earlier. A great young person stepping into the next phase of his career to keep on delivering great projects for the country. And the more people we can get like George on board, the better we're going to be, and the industry is going to be in way better shape.
Yeah, great. Lots of good points there. I might come back to some of just a little touch on digital and technology a little bit, but Josh, anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think Craig and Terry have nailed it, and Terry's been taking all my notes really, but similar again. I think real briefly, just construction knowledge at the front of the project, great outcome. That's a great opportunity. Get the builder or whoever, like Terry said, in the D&B world or ECI, like there's so much value to add there. As a sector, we haven't done a great job of that in the past, so it's been more of a get into a negotiated position rather than actually add value. So now it's how do you actually show that value, and then clients respect that value, and risk transfer potentially is one of those ones where you can show it earlier, and as the confidence builds, then it sees as more of a risk dump to being a shared equitable outcome. I think genuine collaboration with our trade partners, that there's so much knowledge in the construction sector that sits outside the main contractor, for instance, or the builder, as say. I challenged, like, why is the builder the one that has to manage everything end of the day? And it's because you're there from the first time you put a spade in the ground to the time you give the client the keys, right? So that's why you're on across the whole ecosystem, I'd say. But we don't know everything about every single outcome, and we shouldn't be arrogant enough to think that we do. So lean into those trades that are specialists in what they do, and then get that knowledge. That's a real good opportunity. It means probably putting your eggs in a few more baskets earlier than what we normally would in a tendered situation, but those outcomes can make big differences in projects, especially starting like offshore manufacture or PT slabs, for instance, or different ways and methodologies and program and services. So I think that's a great opportunity for the sector to lean into where the opportunities are there. Technology, I'm young enough to be able to see in the industry before technology came in, but also be able to adapt with it as it's gone through its development. There's a lot of chat about construction being so late to pick up technology in that, and I kind of push back on that as well, because it's an industry that everything's bespoke. Like, how many projects are identical for the team that went on it, for the location of the site, for the weather the project was built in? There's nothing repeatable in that. So sometimes that technology is down to your people, right? So if we're going to start developing technology that helps potentially a white collar worker, someone who's in the office, to do that stuff and speed up their deliverables, for instance, which is a great use of what's happened in Hawkins with that sort of deliverables register and stuff. Well, what is that team now doing for the person on the coalface, swinging the hammer or pouring concrete in the ground or running cables? What are we doing to make them more efficient? So if we're going to use technology for the office side, then how does it impact on the productivity on the ground? And I think that's the exciting thing in the opportunity space, is like, we now have opportunity to move some of the admin tasks that were creating backlog for PMs and site managers and QSs to then, be a better leader on site, go and show true leadership and find out where the things that are creating pinch points and fix those things. And then the last part, obviously, investing in the downturn, right? The quietest part of a cycle is when capability is most available. People aren't as busy as they have been. They're not tapped out and super busy trying to deliver projects, and investment is often the cheapest, right? So when we've got a time when we've got some time on our hands, we've got a lack of projects potentially, if we know that the pipeline's coming, then it'll give business leaders and those in the C-suite more confidence to maybe press through the market at the moment and invest and continue investing. But I suppose that confidence piece has to come, and that's probably the opportunity comes in my mind, circling back, is that if we bring the smart people to the table earlier, get confidence in these projects can work, give the developers that backing that, yep, it's going to happen, because if we do this, this, and this, the number will stack, then there's more likelihood those projects go ahead, and then that's a ripple effect, I suppose, in that investment. So it is putting a lot of faith in the future, but I'm really positive about that, because I think when you see that opportunity that it's there, you see the challenge, then it's great for us. We grab it with both hands and we go hard. That's what the construction sector does. When you see someone on site who wants to hit a concrete pour, for instance, and you see that fire in their eyes about meeting a date, even if you know that it's really hard, and when they achieve it, that sort of enthusiasm that comes out, it's infectious, right? So let's apply that to our business leadership lens as well. Put that concrete pour as an analogy in our mind, and then push towards that. And then, what's the worst thing that can happen if it doesn't achieve? At least the industry's got a little bit better. We've probably got some better systems, and then when the workflow comes on, we'll be in a better place to respond.
Yeah, great. From what you've all been saying, there is plenty of opportunity out there, which is good, and plenty of things to be positive about, that's for sure. We're actually tracking pretty well for time. We've got about a quarter of an hour left, which leaves plenty of time for some questions. Just as a little bit of a kind of last comment from each of you all, I'm keen to hear kind of what is one thing that businesses should be ready for next, is something that businesses should be watching closely, or how can they stay prepared in a changing environment? So just kind of first thing that comes to mind. Do you want to start with you, Kirsten?
Sure. I would say be ready to learn and flex. because your job is going to be affected by AI. There's no question of it. It's not a matter of how, it's just a matter of when. I did a address to Mass University to some graduates a couple of months ago, and they were really concerned. A lot of them were QSs, really concerned about what were they going to do for careers now that their QSing qualification wasn't going to be relevant. But of course it's going to be relevant, because AI is not a leader. You know, AI is a tool, but it's not going to create people that can be good leaders or communicators. It doesn't build trust. So all of those things that are the essence of being a human being in the workplace aren't going to change. So just embrace it and work with it.
Absolutely right. Craig, one thing from you.
For me, I think it's about being adaptable. Change is constant, change is inevitable, and it's always going to happen. And I think if you're adaptable and flexible to that, and sort of what we alluded to before about being innovative within that change, I think that's the thing you got to be doing. I mean, what do they say? The sign of stupidity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result. And I think too often we're scared of change, and that's AI, that's all of those things. And I think if you're open to change, you're open to being adaptable and working with it, you'll get great results going forward.
Yeah, great answer. Terry?
Yeah, I think a little bit about what we touched on the last some of the last discussion really was around efficiency and productivity and making people more efficient, because that's, you know, the more workload that comes on people, the more they have to undertake. But if they can be more efficient doing it by ways of utilisation, like we talked about before with QA systems and deliverable schedules, developing those into program tools, you know, so the guy swinging the hammer knows exactly where he's walking to next, making those moves direct and intentional, and making that efficient.
Nice. And Josh?
Yeah, like everyone is looking at AI, right? And everyone's talking about it, and everyone's thinking it's going to be this, you know, great savior of construction. Potentially, we're a dying industry that's slow to adopt technology, all this stuff. But technology without a defined delivery challenge is just another overhead. So if we haven't actually sorted out what is it trying to solve for us, then it's just going to be a cost that we're going to incur. You start talking about token usage and stuff, you start developing systems that might put out some really interesting and nice graphs, but it's costing you a truckload in token usage. So what is it actually giving you? There are questions that need to be answered. So I think you can't cut your way through technology adoption if you remove that skill set from your business now and then expect to use AI to get you back to where you were when things do pick up. I think that's a foolish mindset. I think you need to understand what the challenge you're trying to solve with technology and really implement the skill set into that now. So understanding, you know, how can I actually make the efficiency of my project? How can I give confidence to a client that I can hit a program because I know the metrics that my team can deliver or the trade partners can deliver, and actually work into that realm of it. I see AI as a tool to improve our leadership, right? Its ability to give us better decision-making capability. However, if we're giving it, and I'll use Terry's information, quote from before, shit in, shit out. If you feed absolute rubbish into this software, it's going to feed rubbish out. If we don't know the question we're trying to answer and we just feed it a whole lot of historic data without really confining it and putting some guardrails in place, we're just going to get more crap out, and essentially we're going to overload our team even more. So you might have to bring your team size down a bit, and you're saying AI is going to fill that gap in between. But if the gap it doesn't know how to fix, you've actually just made a worse problem for yourself, and you're going to overload the team you've got. So I'm a futurist. I love thinking about the future and how we go ahead with it. But the core function that this has to provide us is better outcomes from the site, because at the moment I don't see AI swinging a hammer. I don't see AI pulling cables, and yes, that may come in the future. However, right now it's not happening. So we can make all the office stuff easier and more effective, but we're going to use the time effectively to make sure our teams on site are getting better outcomes with projects. Can we find gaps in documentation earlier? Can we use lessons from the past, put it into a system to review our current sort of thinking and methodology, to then bring flags up so that our team on site aren't doing rework constantly. Because I know that most guys I'd just about go even to the extent of all people on site don't want to go do their job twice on a construction project. They'd like to do it right the first time. And most mistakes come from a miscoordination of information and a miscommunication of handing that information on. So I'm keen to see how we can actually implement and make change for those who are on the coalface, because the weather is probably one of the biggest things we've seen in Queensland. It affects morale. And if you're an 18-year-old coming out of school right now and you couldn't see a pathway in which technology is part of what you're doing, then, and you see the toughness of what construction sites are like, then I don't think you'd be choosing this as a career path.
Some great points. And right, that pretty much, wraps up what we have in terms of questions. There's just a reminder for anyone that wants to ask a question of the panel to put it in the Q&A function. Firstly, though, just thank you to all of you, the speakers today, for such detailed responses. There was some great stuff to come out of there. We do have a few comments here, which I might just read out. So, great member up in the Auckland region, Paul Stiles, morphed from engineering and management in 1987, just in time for the October 87 stock market crash. Took 5 years for the momentum to be fully stalled in 1992 when they lost all their jobs. The scene today is by far the worst for his business, but as the panel says, keep positive and give our mentees direction and hope. So, yeah, I agree. Stay positive, and Paul's a great mentor of ours across our mentor mix. And then Dave, another member up in Auckland who's involved in a lot, kind of echoed what you just said then, Josh. Innovation starts with understanding the problem, not the technology. AI, drones, digital twins, autonomous vehicles are powerful tools, but they only create value when they solve real business challenges, reduce risk, and improve decision making. Great comment. Just in terms of technology, is there one kind of piece of technology in particular that you're using or seeing or you've kind of heard from that you think will have a big impact on the industry or within your business specifically? That can go to anyone.
I don't think there's anything specific from my side. Sorry, Jed. I don't like from my side. A lot of the technology bases are more around commercial construction, and by the time you load everything into the software, we've already built the house. So it's probably not so much in that space from a construction perspective. But a lot of technology is changing probably in some of the CRM systems and after compliance management type systems, where you've got your dishwasher and the person comes along and sells their house to the next person, but nobody's got the manual. So, we're working in places like that where you've got a QR code, you scan it, and it keeps all the data for that particular house available for however many people end up buying that house over the generation of the house. So lots of things like that, I think, rather than on the construction side. Something
like that would be incredibly useful, though, the amount of kind of lost information when you go into a house, you've got no idea. So, nice. Anything else?
I think probably one that's fairly basic one is introduction of a tool called Hammertech that's been adopted over the last few years. Quite a few companies are starting to use it now. We've found it really really productive in terms of, I guess it can be used as a safety tool. So it clocks numbers of people coming onto site, clocks your site safe card, the hours of work, all of that type of thing, and can track your, enter in your toolbox talk, so everything is in one format. That's been a really, really good system that's been implemented as well. So there's different things out there, as well as also timescapes. You're not getting into obviously the digital data, the Robistos and the cubics and those types of things, and with the BIM technology, this sort of sits out separate. But your timescapes is through camera technology. You can sort of track program activities. You're looking through different cameras, and when did something get installed? What was the weather like on that particular day? What was that size of that stockpile of spoil? Was it in that place or was it in that place? How many trucks come in that day? And so good technology like that is out there, sort of between timescapes and Hammertech, that just help track day-to-day activities and improve efficiency.
Nice. Yeah, first time I'd heard of Hammertech, but I've heard timescapes mentioned a couple of times over the last few weeks in various discussions. anything that Cook Brothers is using in particular, or you're excited about, Josh?
I'm definitely excited about AI, artificial intelligence, and how we are using it. When I started my apprenticeship, we're still by fax, and generally the phone call with the client was like after 5 o'clock on the home phone line from my boss back. So it was a different communication network right back then, and so I think now looking at AI technology and what it's doing in terms of helping those of us that probably aren't so good at capturing notes, for instance, or how we actually communicate. Builder by trade, didn't finish school, wasn't great at English, so my writing skills have been probably terrible during my time in the sector, and I've definitely learned how to utilize tools that it would make things that I'm not so good at, enhance them, but then use what I love doing, which is problem solving and really working in that space more. And I think for me, seeing how the AI stuff can remove some of that administrative burden that now what I'm using for my time is I'm spending more time getting to site, which is something I actually love. And I love going to site and talking with the team and understanding, just chatting with them how things are going, what are the challenges they're facing, and then taking that back and seeing, is this a technology problem we need to solve? Is it a human resources problem? Is it a training problem? I think for me, using AI, I suppose, and there's a co-pilot mix with some Claude as well, to then provide me more capacity to go into that leadership space. And so technology is probably the tool that's being used, but it's not the thing that I think is the part that I'm loving. And I see now with how things are moving so quickly in that space, it is a scary space to navigate. And I think for me, there probably needs to be a little bit more in the environment to how to teach what that looks like, because AI is moving so quickly, and even if what you thought was true 3 months ago, it's different now, right? So, and it is a scary space to understand what it looks like. And I think also the part of that is the AI sovereignty, and what does that look like for New Zealand if AI, we don't have something here in New Zealand that's ours, and we haven't trained it how to be like a Kiwi, how we communicate, how communication skills, how we interact, all that stuff. And we're relying on stuff outside of New Zealand, that would create a big burden in the future if this tap gets turned off, right? And so, I think the technology piece is really to drive that human leadership piece. And when we've got some skill set challenges coming up and a resource challenge, then what more of a time to be spending in that technology space of one-to-one connection.
Yeah, I like your lens on AI, using it to kind of free up your time to do the things you love. Which I think is awesome. Kirsten, anything from you? You had a good example last week at the Built-in Head panel about some technology you'd seen or heard of.
Oh, I did, yeah. What did I talk about? Drones, I think, in the quarry situation, how they were using drones to check stockpiles and check safety on benches, and that's where I was going. But Hayden, it might be nice to talk about Digicom.
Yes, a couple of things, I guess, to kind of wrap up now. So one of our conference that we do every second year, this year we had Build Up, which is about people, performance and productivity. And next year in March, we will have our Digicom conference. So it's all about kind of the future digital community. Will be taking place in Auckland, and just formed a working group for that. But really excited about some of the opportunities to kind of cover digital across construction and infrastructure, and look at kind of, some of the tools that people are using and things that we can get excited by moving forward. So that's, more information on that to follow in the coming months. There is an opportunity, though, in a couple of weeks for our next Industry Insights. It is on digital first responders, so leveraging AI and data to combat low productivity. So very topical given what we've heard today. That will be featuring Theodoros Galanos, who's the Janitor of Artificial Intelligence Leader at Oricon, and John Sinclair, who's Digital Services Director at Performance Technology, and that discussion will be moderated by Brad Austin, who is the Commercial Director at Procore. That webinar is on Thursday, the 6th of August at 12 p.m, so please visit our website to register for that, and we hope to see you there. But from me, big thank you to the four of you for taking your time to speak today. Some really great discussions, and hopefully the audience got lots out of it. But enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you either online for the next one or at another event in the future. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. See you.
See you later.